Well, good afternoon, and to some of us that are viewing in our author's location, good morning. And welcome to PBALC's Literacy Speaking live stream. And we are broadcasting at a special hour today. Normally we do these at noon Central Time, Texas, but we have a very special guest that is in New Australia, correct?
Yes,
Australia.
Melbourne, Australia.
And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit early at noontime for her. So we're doing it at a special time today to kind of accommodate our author, our very special author that we're so excited to have today. We want everyone to welcome, and we're excited to welcome author Jane Yang today. We are featuring her book, The Lotus Shoes, which she was referred to us from our Madeline Martin, which is another author that we featured last month's uh, author presentation. So we are so excited that she referred us to Jane and to her book, and we're so happy to have you today, Jane.
Thank you so much for accommodating my time zone. We're at the
Absolutely.
end of the world, so it's always a bit hard to get a suitable time with America in particular. And I'm so grateful for Madeline's referral. She's so lovely. She read the Lotus Shoes, and we've been chatting on Instagram. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yes, we're always excited to learn about new authors. We weren't aware about your book, and so she started telling us about it. And we're like, oh, we definitely need to get her on the show, and so she can tell us about her your wonderful book. So, why don't you start off by introducing yourself and telling all of our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'll start off by saying that I'm not an, a writer like from the beginning of my journey. I actually spent the first decade or so of my working career in the science field. So I grew up in from a migrant family. We're Chinese Vietnamese, and from that sort of background, if you can get the score, the sensible thing to do for a good daughter is to go into the science. So I became a pharmacist, even though my heart was always in reading and literature. And it took me a long time to get going, actually, almost when I was close to 30, when I met my husband, who is from a European background. And his family teaches him to dream. I I needed permission to dream because I came from such a um, structured society where we don't value dreams. We value practical jobs, jobs that pay bills. So without him, the Lotus Shoes wouldn't exist.
But your dream is paying your bills now, right? So, because you're such a wonderful writer. So I'm
It
sure your
is,
parents were
yeah,
very proud of you.
yes, they are. So I persisted. It took a long time. It took 13 years to get published. I didn't just work on this one manuscript, but the whole process did take 13 years. And I kept working on the side in a part-time job while I did that. And
Mhm.
also raised, we've got three children as well. So life is very busy.
Oh, wow. And so you've always enjoyed reading and writing your entire life. You always enjoyed that aspect.
I've always enjoyed reading. So as I came to Australia when I was 7, and as soon as I was able to read English, I've been nonstop. I think one of my earliest books I've read, apart from picture storybooks that I can remember, is Judy
Mhm.
Bloom. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. And
Yes.
also the Gymnast Club. Everyone read the Babysitters Club, but I was obsessed with the Gymnast Club. I remember
Oh, well,
reading
that's
those
a
in
new
upper
one. I've
primary.
never heard of that one.
You know what? I can't even really remember the stories that well, but it was about girls and friendships, a lot like the Babysitters Club, but I think it was like a competitor to it. But I
Mhm.
actually never actually wrote anything until I met my husband because um, I'll, the best way I can explain it is in the Lotus Shoes, there's a scene where someone asks this little flower, do you dream? And she says, no, I keep my dreams pruned like a punjoi, which is a Cantonese word for bonsai.
Mm.
Admittedly, that is actually putting a part of myself into the story to endure and get through the science degree that I needed to. I didn't write because to do that would be like to dream, and I needed to focus on what I needed to get through the degree. So I only started in my late 20s.
But many professions like pharmacists, we're told, and pharmacists and in a lot of the medical fields and a lot of like attorneys are like, we do so much reading. And so I've had medical professionals and attorneys that I've served on the board of our literacy organization, and I'm always curious. I'm like, what, you're an attorney, you're in the medical profession, why do you want to serve or be involved with the literacy organization? And they always say, because I always enjoyed reading, and I had to do so much reading when I was studying for my field of study. So it's not a far off dream that many attorneys and people in the medical profession go into writing and being authors.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do think about it. But it is a hard journey, and I needed the support. And I said, as I said, the permission to dream. It's really
Yeah,
bizarre. And that's certainly not, the way I'm raising my children is to pursue happiness. But that
yeah.
wasn't the way I was raised. And when you grow up all your life with one way of thinking, it takes a special person to break through that, I think.
Yes. And so, we're an adult literacy organization.
Mm.
And so we always ask all of our featured authors why literacy and adult literacy is such an important uh, case for support in the world.
Well, for this, I would like to speak about my mother's experience.
Hmm.
So, as I said, we are migrants, and our her first language is Cantonese. So she's fluent in Cantonese or Chinese. It's the same script, just spoken differently. So,
Hmm.
but with English, she never quite learned to speak English or to read and write. At first, it was because it was life was really hard, and she's worked long hours, and there was no time. And now I think she's just gone to an age where she doesn't think she could learn, but I'm still encouraging her because her inability to read English is really isolating. It really cuts her off from society. For
Hmm.
example, when we go to restaurants, she can't order food. She
Hmm.
can read a few words, but essentially it's really difficult for her. And now that she's getting older, there's a lot of medical forms to fill.
Hmm.
She can't understand it. I do all that for her. And just a lot of health literacy as well. She's unable to read a lot of that. Like during COVID, it was really hard for her to keep up with what was happening. So
Hmm.
I see literacy as a bridge really between people, a way to communicate for the individual to connect with society and those around them. On an
Hmm.
even more personal level, like my oldest child is Lucas is now 13. He has a phone, um, and she can't text to him. They don't have
Yeah.
that. He's very fond of her because when they were young, she took care of them. But now that they need more than feeding and the basic needs taken care of, she can't communicate with them, and it's really sad.
Yeah, it can be very isolating. It definitely for
Yeah,
people who have low literacy skills or don't know the English language. And so, please encourage your mom to take some classes. The average age of our students is in between 40 and 60 years old. So it's never too late to learn anything. So
thank
please
you.
encourage
I
your
would tell her
your
that. I tell her that all the time, but coming from someone else, a professional as well, she would be more inclined to listen.
She's welcome to enroll with us if she wants to. We'll take her. So, you touched on this a little bit, but what inspired you to become a writer other than wanting to dream? It's like, did you want to just get your because there's people have a lot of dreams. They dream about being, uh, a politician or president or a lawyer, or people even dream about being, a pharmacist or going to the moon. But what inspired you? Why was your dream to become a writer?
I think it's just to tell my own stories, really. It's as
Hmm.
simple as that. Um, I discovered historical fiction when I was about 15, when I found a
Hmm.
copy of Pride and Prejudice in the school library. It was in a corner that no one wanted to read. It's part of the neglected class set. But anyway, I read it and I'm just fallen in love with that genre. And also, I grew up watching a lot of period dramas imported from Hong Kong, Cantonese dramas, and I've fallen in love with that world. And I want to tell stories particularly from women of forgotten times,
Hmm.
um, giving voices to stories that may not otherwise be known. Like in the Lotus Shoes, I talk about the really underexplored feminist movement called the Celibate Sisterhood, which was
Okay.
from really only known in southern China at the end of the 19th century, where my ancestors are from. So women, for the first time, were became financially independent because from silk rearing, they made so much money, sometimes more than an annual farmer's income. They put the money together to build a sanctuary so they could reject arranged marriages and have more freedom than the average
Mm.
woman. Um, but there was a huge cost. Like if they had to take a chastity vow, and if they were found to have lost their virginity, they would be shoved into a bamboo cylinder designed to cage pigs and
Oh.
executed that way. And it's not a piece of history that a lot of people know about, even
Mm.
amongst my Chinese friends, let alone amongst Western readers. So I wanted to give voice to stories like that.
Wow. And so how did you, I know you said you love historical fiction, but are there other ways that you develop your characters? Because I know a
Yes,
lot of
so
authors are like, oh, I use, some pieces of my friends or people that I meet, like on Subway or uh, traveling the world. And how do you come up with your characters or develop your characters?
yeah, so far with Linging and Little Flower, they are modelled a little bit on my grandmothers, both sides. So on dad's
Okay.
side, Mama was very petite and elegant. She's like a doll. She doesn't
Hmm.
raise her voice, but those eyes of hers could
Uh-huh.
stop a train if she wanted to.
Yes.
And so I based Little Flower on her somewhat. And also at the time when I was starting to write the Lotus Shoes, I read a lot of historical fiction where the women were quite outspoken and modern in personality.
Mhm.
But for myself and my friends, we were quieter. So I wanted to develop a character like that. And
Okay.
Girl with a Pearl Earring sort of gave me a blueprint to show that you can have a quieter character who is still really strong and proactive
Mhm.
in her actions. So that's Little Flower. And with Lin Jing, that's based on my papa, so that's mum's mum. She was really tall, about 167 or 168 centimeters. Sorry, I don't know what that's like in feet, but
Wow.
that's really tall for a Chinese woman. She
Uh-huh.
was on par with most men and even sometimes taller than them, and really athletic. She wanted more than what her gender role would permit at that time. And Lin Jing's very much like that. So once I have an idea of what the characters are like, then I think about what their character flaw is, what stops them from getting to the goal that they want, and
Okay.
then it kind of just takes off from there.
And just develop them from there. Okay.
Hmm.
So did you have to do a lot of research for the Lotus shoes?
Yeah, I did actually. Well, actually, at the beginning, I was a bit worried that I wouldn't find anything to about the Celibate Sisterhood because it was stories passed down to me from Papa, who actually wanted to join one. but luckily she didn't. I guess I wouldn't be here. But not. But for her, it was a disappointment. She was born in 1930,
Uh-huh.
and by then the sisterhoods were already in decline because of the Great Depression. It basically decimated the silk industry, and a lot of these celibate sisters had to migrate to Hong Kong or Singapore to become amas. So yeah, I was a bit skeptical whether I could find anything, but then I found someone who wrote a thesis about the Celibate Sisterhood in the
Oh.
1980s, which I've mentioned at the back in the author's notes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was amazing. She interviewed so many of them, and I guess from there, I looked at the sources that she used and was able to track some of them down as well. So yeah, I ended up doing a lot of research mainly for that section of the story.
Did you get to do any travel in during your research period
Yes,
to
I actually did.
China?
So I took a trip to Sundak, where the second half of the story is set, because I wanted
Uh-huh.
to track down one of these sanctuaries, which were called the Halls of the Eternal Purity. But this is going back 10 years ago, by the way. So things were not as available. And plus, in China, they don't use Google, they use this other search engine. Anyway, all I
Mm-hmm.
had was the name in Chinese characters. I got there. I asked my hotel receptionist, like, can I find this place? Is it hard? And she goes, oh, yeah, that's fine. You just take a bullet train to this place, and ask any taxi driver and they'll take you there. And I did that. But after an hour, we were still driving around and I just thought maybe this is a scam.
Mm-hmm.
The taxi driver spoke Mandarin and I spoke Cantonese. We sort
Oh
of
no.
understood each other, but didn't fluently. I had to call my mum on the phone to translate. And then long story short, we found it, but then it was closed. And I was so disappointed. But then I walked around the side and there was a sign to say, we needed to go to a Bruce Lee theme park nearby to get the tour guide.
Wow.
And I'm like, is this for real? It was. We drove there. It was about maybe a 10-minute drive. And she was there, the tour guide. And she was really keen to show me around. And yeah, so I actually went into one of these um, sanctuaries, one of the last ones left that were preserved. It's sort of like a museum. Yeah. And that
Wow.
was really fruitful. I put so much of what I saw there into the story.
Wow. And so did you enjoy this research part of the book? Getting to actually
Yes.
see and touch these places?
Yeah, it was so much fun. And I was really lucky. There was one of the very last remaining celibate sisters there. She must have been in her
Cool.
late 90s. Anyway, I got to interview her. So that was really nice. And she's just sounded so much like my grandma, some of her
Mhm.
views, how much they hated the patriarchy. And
Mhm.
oh, there was something really interesting that she said, which is relevant to your audience. I think she
Mhm.
prefaced what she said with these words. She said, um, my apologies, I don't know my characters, but if you still want to, talk to me, as if
Mhm.
she wasn't as worthy because she couldn't read. So I found that really
Oh,
interesting. Mm,
okay. So were
yeah.
most of these women kind of had very limited education as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
most of them were illiterate. My grandmothers couldn't read. I mean, so reading was reserved for women from wealthier families. My mama had the chance to, but she was actually quite unusual in that, well, maybe not so unusual for the time. She didn't want to
Mhm.
learn. She wanted to focus
Oh.
on feminine domestic skills like embroidery, whereas my grandmother was trying desperately, hiding
Mhm.
it under windows of the schoolroom meant for boys, trying to snatch a few words here and there. So I have two very contrasting grandmothers.
But it's so interesting how literacy and education has been used to kind of
Mm.
control people and limit people. And I know Madeline Martin, she writes a lot of historical fiction as well, and she writes a lot about women as well as being, they only need to learn domestic. items. They don't need to learn how to read or write
Mm,
or be educated. And it seems like it was worldwide that this was happening, not just
yeah,
in certain parts of the United States or anything like that. It was worldwide where um, I guess the government was using literacy and education as a way to kind of bring down people or control people.
yeah. To control, to prevent people from advancing up the social ladder, I think,
Hmm.
to limit social mobility.
Yes,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
I'm really glad we live in an age where literacy is a lot more accessible.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the Lotus Shoes, and then we'll ask you to kind of read a selection for our viewers.
Okay, great. I feel like I've talked about it so much already,
So
but
much.
I will give you a short pitch on what I normally say when I hand sell the book.
Hmm.
Sometimes because I've been going to bookstores that stock my book, and then I'm like, "Excuse me, are you looking for a new read?" Anyway, so what I always say, I always start by telling. I'll hold up the. This is the Australian UK copy, but it's got the
That's
two
a
girls.
beautiful
So
cover, by the way. Who worked on your cover?
thank you. It is Becky. Guy. Yeah, she's very talented. These are hand drawn. So I always
Hmm.
hold this book up because I'm in Australia. We don't have access to the beautiful American cover. So
Hmm.
Little Flower was sold into slavery at 6 years old to
Okay.
become Lin Jing's slave maid or mujay. So the closest equivalent would be a lady's maid in the English world.
Hmm.
Um, so in the late 1800s, having bound feet um, the was so common that about 90, I would say at least 90% of the women had bound feet. But Lin Jing's father saw an opportunity for promotion because it was at a time where there was the Western-led anti-foot binding movement was beginning, and his superior wanted to marry their son to a woman who wouldn't have bound feet. And even though there were only six, the engagement would secure a career advancement for him. So he wants Lin Jing to keep her natural feet, and that meant
Hmm.
Little Flower had to give up hers. So her mother
Oh,
loved her
okay.
so much that even though they were not well to do, she bound her feet, hoping that she would have a better marriage and have a better life. But then her father died, and that's why she was sold into slavery. Anyway, this change led to a lot of unforeseen events.
Hmm.
And then at 18 years old, a scandal strikes the family, and both women are forced to join the Celibate Sisterhood that I spoke about. Um,
So
and
this is how the story begins.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And hmm, yeah,
So
so I'll start reading.
what can you uh for our viewers read a selection for our viewers now?
Sure. So this is chapter 3. I've chosen this passage because it gives an idea, a sample of what the two women's personalities are. At this time, though, they are still 6 years old. So my belly was an empty well, and fatigue dragged at my limbs like logs. I didn't say that this is from Little Flower's point of view. Each morning, I started my day at sunrise, fetching and boiling water for Miss Linjing's wash. The kitchen was so far from her bedchamber that my golden lilies throbbed, and my arms shook from the weight of the copper kettle by the time I reached her door. My stomach grumbled, craving its next ration of watery congee and limp gailan that was still several hours away. I glanced at a nearby stone bench, wishing I could rest my aching feet. But Cerise had said if I failed to win Miss Linjing's favour quickly, I might be sold to a sing-song house and wouldn't see my Along again. At the thought of my mother, sadness climbed onto my chest and settled there. Blinking back tears, I placed one wobbling foot in front of the other as I clambered up the pagoda, which stood on a man-made hillock. Maybe Miss Linjing would like me if I could keep up with her games. This morning's downpour had made the steps wet and slippery. Ahead of me, Miss Lynching bounded up like a frog. From the top, she shot bamboo dragonflies over the pagoda's ledge, letting them spiral to the ground. When she scrambled down to fetch them, she said, "You can't get up the steps." "Yes, I can," I said, determined to prove her wrong. "This game needs strong players, and you are weak." "You're very good at this game, miss. Can you show me how to throw the dragonfly?" Pleasure flushed in her wide-set eyes, and a smile tugged at the corners of her mouth, but her arms remained crossed. "Please, miss, I really want to play with you." "Fine," she said. "You can play with me if you can make it to the top." Taking a deep breath, I trudged on, gingerly placing my feet to avoid patches of slimy moss and small pools of water that had gathered in the grooves of the stone slabs. By halfway up, my thighs were trembling from the effort and I was heaving for breath. There was no railing to rest against. After endless minutes, a dozen steps stood between me and Miss Linjing, who had by now made 2 return trips to the pagoda, grinning at me each time she dashed past. I urged on my quivering muscles. In my haste to reach her, I almost slipped and tumbled backwards, but windmilled my arms and swung forward instead, landing on my hands. I dared not stand up again for fear of falling and breaking my neck, so I crawled the rest of the way up. "I've made it," I panted, slowly coming to my feet. "Can we play now?" "You took too long." "I'm bored." "But I just got here." "If you snap at me again, I'll tell Alan to sell you to a horrid place where girls get a disease that rots their noses." I dropped to my knees and apologized, banging my forehead against the cold stone. "I'm sorry, miss. Please don't do that." "You don't look sorry enough." I clutched her knees and looked up, begging her to forgive me. With a smirk, she tossed the bamboo dragonflies into a puddle, shoving me aside as she skipped down the steps. I snatched one up, snapped it, and hurled it down the garden path. If I still had big feet, if my Adair was still alive, if I was still a daughter and not a slave, I would chase after Miss Lynching and kick her back. But ifs were not reality, and I had been abandoned. Besides, Ah Leung's words rang in my ears. Follow orders, obey, look after my golden lilies. If I did all that, I would see her again soon.
Well, it just depicts beautifully how, you know, the contrast between, you know, slaves or lower middle class and the wealthy and the royals, right? Um,
Yeah,
but it seems like there may be a developing friendship at the end of this, though. I don't want
tentative.
you to give
Yeah,
too much away, but
yeah. I actually, it's one of the key themes of the story. Whether they can, be there can be whether friendship is possible when there's an um
such,
power imbalance.
yeah. So, what do you hope for your readers? You want them. What's the biggest takeaway that you want your readers to take from this story?
Yeah, so for me, it's a segue from what I've just said. Actually, that
Mhm.
is, I don't believe it's possible to have meaningful, um, genuine relationships if there is a lack of equality
Mhm.
between two people, whether it's between friends or family or lovers. I think that's
Mhm.
the key message for me in that story. And
Yeah.
I use the different interactions between Little Flower and Linjing to pose this question.
Okay. And so, have you had any readers say, I disagree with you, Jane. I think there is a possibility for friendships to
No,
develop, or
no one's reached out to me to say that yet, but I have
Mhm.
had very different and strong opinions about Linjing.
Mhm.
Some people find her unforgivable, um,
Yeah.
but others see her character developed and do actually. several have said to me, I wish there was they wish there was a sequel where they could the friendship could really blossom.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. Interesting to see people's different perspective because, there's so many people that, marry that are not wealthy, but marry into wealth. And they're like, well, they show that example. I'm like, well, see, their marriage is flourishing and, why is it not possible? And, kind of those kind
I
of
think
examples.
that's what I mean by equality is the each person has to respect the other and not
Oh,
see them
yes.
as lesser.
Hmm.
I think those marriages are possible, but only if in between the eyes of the two people they see each other as equals despite the gap in the wealth.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's a journey that Lin Jing has to work towards because for much of the story she sees Little Flower as a useful tool, not
Hmm.
quite as a person. And that's something that she has to work on throughout the story.
So interesting to learn about this new part of history that's not unknown not very known um, in history. So it'll be interesting to read. It's interesting to read about that aspect as well.
Thank you. Yes,
Well,
lots of people have said they like to they've learned a lot from the story, things that
mhm.
and I think a lot of historical fiction readers that's something that they really enjoy learning a new aspect of history.
Absolutely. And about characters that are not that well known either. And like, about Queen Elizabeth and about these big historical figures, but there's other figures that have learning about them that not very many people know about.
Mm,
It's also very interesting. So
thank
what
you.
other projects, Jane, are you currently working on? Because I've heard a rumor that you're currently working on something new.
Yes. So I am working on book two. It's not a sequel, it's a standalone fiction. It's a little bit different from the Lotus Shoes because it will have a supernatural element and some gothic vibes.
Oh,
So think
you're really
sorry,
deviating.
yes, but I'm still focusing on women's stories
Mhm.
because that's where my interest is. So, I don't have a name for it at the moment, but I'm toiling with the title, The Amber Prophecy. So there are two
Okay.
timelines in 1906 and 1806 in China, Shanghai and remote China. So in 1906, Scarlett Lloyd, she's half Chinese, half English. She's a midwife that is completely devoted to her profession and is prepared to be single all her life. And
Uh-huh.
then she gets swept up by a wealthy man. So funny, we are talking about that before, but she doesn't feel good enough to become a lady. So that's
Okay.
something that she has to work on. Anyway, he sweeps her off the feet, takes her to Cloud Mountain, which is a imaginary place. I've based it on a few places I've visited. It's
Mhm.
really remote, and there strange things start to happen. And well, the question is it a haunting or who's the real threat for Scarlet? And
Or is
then,
this all even
um,
real?
yes, exactly. And then in 1806, there's a young maid, a slave maid called Jia Yi. So she is 16. She's really pretty and sweet, but a little bit naive. She's in love with the heir and hopes he'll take her as a concubine. And then all of a sudden, she gets promoted to become a little wife, which she thinks
Okay.
is a like a probationary period to becoming a concubine. But it's actually a murky position that I've heard about through my grandmothers that for some
Mm.
girls who are really unfortunate girls, they are sold into these families as these little wives, which are basically a sexual plaything for the masters, young masters, until they get married. I
Oh,
don't want to, yeah,
that's
I
very dark.
can't imagine what happened to them sometimes,
Mhm.
when they're no longer useful. So that's what her position is, but she doesn't know that. And she thinks life is perfect, and then something terrible happens to her. And there's two stories will be interwoven as it goes on.
Oh, I can't wait, Jane. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Well, how can people get more information about you and your books? Are your books sold everywhere books are sold? Tell us.
Yes, it's pretty much everywhere that you normally get books. And in terms of getting in contact with me, I'm active on Instagram. So that's just at Jane Yang Writing, no space, just all one word. And on there, I post about news about my work. I've also made some videos to help readers get immersed into the world. Like there's one where it's a compilation of photos from when I dressed up when I went to China. I found a studio that did period costume dress up in Qing Dynasty, exactly when the time period's set.
Yes.
So I do little videos like that. I love to connect with your audience there. If you end up reading the book, please reach out to me, send me a message, and let me know how you're going.
Is your mom and grandma, are your mom and grandma featured in the videos on your Instagram too? I would love to see
In
them.
some, I've got some photos with Mum, but she's very shy. She'll never do a video. There is some photos of me and her, but my grandma's no longer with us,
Okay. Well,
unfortunately. Yeah,
I'd
Mum's there.
love to see your mom and have videos of her and like, oh, I can see what this character looks like or looked like in the
Hmm.
1800s. Well, thank you so much. The last question that we always ask our authors, because we love reading here and reading here at PBLC. What are you currently reading, if you have time for reading? And
Great.
give some recommendations.
Sure.
That's
I
how we
actually
found
listened.
you.
Thank you. I listened. I recently listened to an audiobook because I find it makes housework more fun. So
Yes.
I plug it in when I'm doing housework. It's called Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yam, struggling to pronounce her surname, Yambao, Yambao. It's
Okay.
a standalone romantasy, which is the first romantasy I've ever read. It's based on like a sort of alternative version of Tokyo. Really
Okay.
fascinating, really interesting concepts, and the love story is very engaging. One of the best things I like about most interesting creations that she talks about in this world is um, in that world, when you carry a bag, it's
Hmm.
actually a portal, so it doesn't have to be heavy. Like you can
Oh,
just reach in and grab what you need from the fridge, for example, if you're thirsty as you're on your way. I thought that was such a great idea.
oh, that would be if somebody can invent that, that would be awesome because then your
Right.
purse would be less heavy, right?
Yeah. So the love interest for the main character, Keishan, he's actually a physicist. So he's already thinking, how can I bring this back? He's from the human world, our world. And he's thinking, I've
Okay.
got to invent this.
Oh,
So
that is very interesting. We'll have to check her out. Maybe we can feature her here on our live
hmm,
stream as well.
yeah.
Well, Jane, I want to thank you again so much for joining us this afternoon. This has been wonderful to learn about you and your mom and the Lotus Shoes, and we look forward to hopefully maybe featuring you again when your new book is released. Make sure everyone check her out on Instagram, and we'll post her website and a link to purchase her books on our comments as we always do after the live stream. And like I said, her books are available everywhere. We encourage everyone to shop at independent bookshops if possible. But otherwise, you can find her book everywhere books are sold. Thank you again, Jane, and make sure and check out the Lotus Shoes by Yang Ying.
Thank you
And
so
we
much.
absolutely
I just
thank you.
I
Thank
just
you,
wanted to
everybody.
say what a pleasure it is. I really enjoyed that. You're so easy to talk to. Yeah, so thank you so much. I haven't done many of these. This is my second live session, so
Oh, wow.
I'm getting used to them now, thanks to lovely interviewers like yourself. Thank you so much.
Well, we enjoyed you, and I love your accent. I love interviewing people with British and Australian accents. They're just, and I love listening to audiobooks with English and Australian accents. They're just to me, they're so much more relaxing. So
Thank you.
hopefully maybe your book will come out in an audiobook and we can all listen to it.
Oh, the Lotus Shoes, you mean?
Yes,
It
absolutely.
is an
Oh,
it
it
is
is?
an audiobook as well, yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. Then we will I don't know if you ever been to Texas or if you ever come to Texas. It's a long drive from one place to another in Texas. So audiobooks are a great way to pass the time on these long road trips. So thank you
Same with
everyone
Australia.
again.
Everything's
Absolutely.
really far apart.
um, again, thank you everyone for joining us at this different time period. I hope you get to check out Jane's book, and we'll see everybody next time for our next literacy speaking live stream. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.